when Cena's going to say stuff like that, or anybody, do they run it by you first to say, hey, is it okay if I say this?
No, I don't know. It's brand new. He's just like, he went to town. He gets like sink or swim with that guy.
He was terrifying. Cardiff, Wales, September 2022. Clash at the castle. The crowd is roaring. Sheamus stands in the ring with his chest already turning red. Across from him is Gunther, the ring general, the Austrian chopping machine who has turned the Intercontinental Championship into the most prestigious title in wrestling. This is not just another match. This is not just another opponent. This is the fight for the one title Sheamus has never held. The one piece missing from his ultimate Grand Slam. The one achievement that would cement his legacy as one of the greatest of all time. But to get it, he has to survive a man who might hit harder than anyone he has ever faced. The chops rain down. Each one sounds like a gunshot echoing through the Principality Stadium. Each one breaks blood vessels beneath the skin. Each one paints Sheamus's chest a deeper shade of crimson. The pain is real. The damage is real. By the end, he will lose. The title will stay with Gunther, but Sheamus will also earn something more valuable than gold. He will earn respect, a standing ovation from over 60,000 fans, and proof that even after nearly 2 decades in this brutal business, he can still go to war with the absolute best of them. That moment in Cardiff tells you everything you need to know about Sheamus. He is tough. He is brutal. He is relentless. He is the Celtic Warrior, a pale Irish brawler who has built an entire career on hitting hard and never backing down. But even warriors have limits. Even hard men have moments where fear creeps in. Not the fear of running away, not the fear of cowardice, but the fear of survival, the fear of politics, the fear of humiliation, the fear of pain that might end your career. Wrestling is a strange business. On screen, everything is scripted. The winners are chosen weeks in advance. The outcomes are planned down to the second. Every punch is choreographed. Every kick is pulled. But backstage, in the locker room, in the gym, in the cheap apartments where wrestlers share space to save money and split bills, that is where real life happens. That is where egos clash. That is where real fights break out. That is where reputations are built or destroyed in a single moment of violence. Sheamus built his career on being fearless, the pale Irish brawler who hits like a freight train, the man who delivers banger after banger after banger, the Celtic warrior who never shows weakness. But the truth is more complicated than that. The truth is darker. There are 10 men who made Sheamus feel something close to fear, 10 men who tested him in ways the cameras never showed, 10 men who exposed the cracks in the tough guy mask he wore so well. This is not a list of cowards. This is a list of survivors. And if you have made it this far into the story, do us a favor right now. Hit that hype button below this video. Give this video some hype. Let us know you are locked in and ready for the truth, because what comes next is the real story. The story WWE does not always tell you. The story of what happens when the cameras stop rolling and the real battles begin. Fear in wrestling is not simple. It is not black and white. It splits into 2 distinct types. The first type is conflict, backstage fights that turn violent, political wars that can end your career, social friction that makes every day a battle, the fear of losing your spot because you said the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time, or because you crossed someone who has more power than you. The second type is respect, the kind of fear you feel for a mentor who can break you in training, the fear you feel for an opponent who hits so hard you wonder if your body will hold up, the fear that comes from knowing someone is simply better than you, more skilled, more dangerous, more capable of ending you. Sheamus experienced both types throughout his career. His entire journey through WWE is a map of these moments. Moments of humiliation, moments of political danger, moments of physical punishment that tested his limits. And to understand the man, to really understand what made the Celtic Warrior, you have to understand the battles he fought when the script was thrown out the window. So let us start at the beginning. The moment when the fearless Celtic Warrior learned that real toughness does not come from muscles or attitude. It comes from surviving the people who can expose you. It comes from learning when to fight and when to step back. It comes from knowing which battles matter and which ones will only get you hurt. Number 10. Yoshitatsu, the day the aura cracked. Florida Championship Wrestling, the late 2000s. The developmental territory where future WWE stars learn their craft before making it to the main roster. Sheamus is a rising star here. Big, pale, aggressive, intimidating. He has the look that Vince McMahon loves. He has the intensity. He has the physicality. WWE is already eyeing him for the main roster. The machine is getting ready to push him to the moon, but he is not there yet. He is still in FCW, learning the American style, getting comfortable with the WWE system. And to save money on the developmental salary, he shares an apartment in Florida with two other wrestlers, Yoshitatsu and Ted DiBiase Jr. On paper, this should not be a problem. Wrestlers room together all the time. It is part of the grind, part of paying your dues, living cheap so you can afford to chase the dream. But this particular arrangement is a powder keg waiting to explode. Sheamus is Irish, from Dublin, with all the cultural baggage that brings. Tatsu is Japanese, trained in the brutal New Japan Pro Wrestling dojo where they beat toughness into you. DiBiase is the son of a wrestling legend, trying desperately to prove himself worthy of his father's name. Three men, one apartment, different cultures, different habits, different backgrounds, different tolerances for messiness and noise and personal space. The friction starts small, it always does. Dirty dishes left in the sink, a protein shaker used without permission. Mundane stuff, the kind of thing roommates argue about in flats and apartments everywhere in the world. But in the high-pressure world of professional wrestling, where everyone is fighting desperately for a spot on the main roster, where egos are fragile and tempers are short and everyone is one injury away from losing their dream, mundane stuff does not stay mundane for long. Reports say Sheamus confronted Tatsu about the dishes, about the shaker, about the general lack of respect for shared space. Maybe he thought his size would end the argument quickly. Maybe he thought Tatsu, the smaller man with the comedy gimmick on television, would immediately back down and apologize. Maybe he thought his reputation as a brawler would be enough to settle things without actual violence. He was wrong, dead wrong. The confrontation turned physical, and despite Sheamus's significant size advantage, despite his brawler reputation, despite the fact that he looked like a monster compared to the smaller Japanese wrestler, Tatsu got the better of it. Multiple sources confirm this embarrassing fact. Tatsu, with his legitimate grappling background from the NJPW dojo and his boxing training, controlled the fight. He used technique where Sheamus relied on size. He used skill where Sheamus relied on aggression. And when the dust settled, Sheamus, the monster heel who was destroying people on television every week, had lost a real fight to his smaller roommate. That is a problem, a massive problem, because in wrestling, your reputation is absolutely everything. If word gets out that you lost a fight backstage, especially to someone the fans see as a comedy character, your tough guy image evaporates like morning mist. You become a joke. Sheamus learned this the hard way. On television, he was unstoppable. He was beating established stars. He was the Celtic Warrior, the pale monster from Ireland. But backstage, the reality was brutally different. He had been humbled by a man half the audience did not take seriously. The fear here is not about Tatsu punching harder than expected. It is about reputational damage. In a business where credibility is the only currency that matters, losing a fight to Yoshitatsu is a career-threatening event. It strips away the invincibility. It removes the aura of danger. It forces you to rely on work ethic and actual skill instead of mere intimidation to maintain your spot. And it teaches you a crucial lesson that Sheamus would carry for the rest of his career. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume size means victory. Never start a fight you are not absolutely certain you can win. Tatsu later suffered a broken neck in NJPW from a botched styles clash. The injury was gruesome, but it proved what Sheamus should have known from the start. Tatsu was tough. He was legitimately trained. He was a real fighter beneath the comedy exterior, and Sheamus had not accounted for that. This incident became a foundational memory for Sheamus, a scar on his ego that never quite healed. It taught him to choose his battles more carefully. It taught him that the locker room is full of people who can hurt you if you step wrong. And it taught him that real toughness is not just about size or muscles. It is about respect, about knowing who you are dealing with. Tatsu earned his respect that day. Sheamus lost some of his. That is a hard lesson to learn in front of your peers, a lesson that stays with you forever. Number 9, Sin Cara, the trainer's room lesson. If the Yoshi-Tatsu incident was a domestic skirmish over dirty dishes, the fight with Sin Cara was a professional territorial dispute that became legendary in WWE locker room lore. But we need to be clear here. Not the first Sin Cara, not Mystico, the original luchador who came to WWE with massive hype and then botched moves constantly and struggled to adapt to the American style. This was the second Sin Cara, Jorge Arias, known as Hunico before he took over the mask. And Hunico had a very different reputation than his predecessor. He was Mexican-American. He came up through the tough Mexican wrestling circuit where they do not coddle you, where you learn to fight for real because sometimes the matches turn into shoots. And backstage in WWE, Hunico was known as a legitimate fighter, a man you did not want problems with. Reports claim Hunico had an undefeated record in backstage fights during his WWE tenure. He reportedly bested Sheamus in their altercation. He reportedly bested Simon Gotch, another tough customer. He even held his own against Chris Jericho, a veteran who knows how to handle himself. This is not a man you want to mess with under any circumstances, but Sheamus did anyway. The fight happened backstage at a a television taping, not in the locker room where such things sometimes happen, not in the hallway where people can scatter, in the trainer's room, the medical area, the one place in the entire venue that is supposed to be neutral ground, a sanctuary where performers go to heal their injuries and get treatment for the damage this business does to their bodies. A physical altercation in the trainer's room is not just a fight, it is a breach of sacred protocol. It is a total breakdown of the civility that keeps the locker room functioning. The details are sketchy, as they always are with backstage fights. Nobody wants to go on record. Nobody wants to snitch. But the consensus from industry insiders like Court Bauer and reports from the Wrestling Observer is brutally clear. Hunico got the better of it. Again, some accounts suggest Sheamus may have initiated the physicality. Maybe he said something disrespectful. Maybe he shoved Hunico. Maybe he expected the smaller man to back down immediately when confronted with his size and intensity. It did not work. Hunico, with his technical skills and street fighting experience and absolute fearlessness, neutralized Sheamus quickly. Why does this matter so much? Because it is the second time Sheamus lost a real fight to a smaller opponent. And this time, it was not about roommate disputes or dirty dishes. This was about hierarchy, about respect, about who you can push around in the locker room and who you absolutely cannot. Hunico operated outside the normal size hierarchy that governs wrestling. In wrestling, bigger men usually assume dominance. It is an unspoken rule. But Hunico broke that rule. He shattered it. He proved that legitimate combat skills hold the ultimate veto power in any physical confrontation. You can be scripted to win every match on television. You can be booked as an unstoppable monster. But if someone wants to hurt you for real, if they have the skills and the willingness, size does not always save you. For Sheamus, this was another strike against his tough guy image, another crack in the armor. The fear of Hunico is the fear of the silent assassin, the unpredictable element who does not telegraph his intentions, the man who does not follow the unwritten rules about not embarrassing your fellow wrestlers. A banger match requires cooperation between both performers. A fight with Hunico does not. Sheamus learned to give Hunico a wide berth after that, to treat him with heightened respect born purely of self-preservation. Because in a scripted sport, the shooters still hold tremendous power. They hold veto power over your tough guy image. And Hunico was absolutely a shooter, a dangerous man hiding behind a colorful mask. Number 8, The Miz, the fear of the wrong future. Not all fear is physical. Not all threats come from fists or takedowns or legitimate fighting skills. Sometimes the fear is cultural. Sometimes it is social. Sometimes it is about identity and what the business is becoming. The conflict between Sheamus and The Miz was never about physical violence. It was about something deeper and more existential. It was about what wrestling should be, and about the fear that the business was changing in a direction that would leave old-school workers like Sheamus behind. When Sheamus arrived on the main roster in 2009, first on ECW and then on Raw, The Miz was already an established presence. But Miz had a significant problem that he could never quite shake. He came from MTV's The Real World. He was a reality television star who decided to become a wrestler. And the locker room, filled with men who had paid their dues on the independent circuit for years or suffered through developmental hell, did not respect that path at all. Sheamus came from the rigorous European independent scene. He had wrestled in Ireland and England in tiny venues for almost no money. He viewed wrestling through a lens of athletic meritocracy and old-school grit and toughness. To him, The Miz represented something genuinely dangerous to the business. Hollywood, entertainment over athletics, style over substance, soft. Sheamus has admitted openly in interviews that he did not like Miz's attitude when they first started working together. He viewed Miz as a representative of the entertainment-first philosophy that many traditionalists feared was diluting the product and making it less legitimate. The fear was not that Miz would beat him up in a fight. That was never going to happen. The fear was that Miz represented the future of wrestling, a future where media training and reality television fame and the ability to do talk show appearances outweighed the ability to take a stiff punch or execute a perfect suplex. A future where guys like Sheamus, who built their entire brands on physical toughness and in-ring work, would be sidelined for guys who could talk smoothly on morning shows and looked good in Hollywood. Over time, this relationship evolved significantly. They worked together frequently, as opponents in singles matches, as reluctant partners in multi-man tag matches, teaming against Daniel Bryan and CM Punk in memorable segments. Sheamus eventually recognized that Miz's durability and work ethic were absolutely legitimate, even if his style and background were different from the traditional path. But in the early years, the fear was very real. It was the fear of association. Sheamus was desperately trying to establish himself as a legitimate Celtic Warrior, a throwback to the tough European brawlers of previous generations. If he got grouped with the sports entertainers like Miz, his carefully crafted brand would be diluted beyond repair. And there was another significant problem that made Miz genuinely genuinely dangerous. Miz was politically savvy in ways Sheamus was not. He had a sharp tongue. He could cut promos that made you look foolish. He could out-talk Sheamus on the microphone every single time. He could outmaneuver him with management because he understood the entertainment side of the business better. Unlike Tatsu or Hunico, Miz could not beat Sheamus up in a physical fight, but he could damage him in other ways that were arguably more dangerous to a wrestling career. He could make Sheamus look bad on the microphone in front of millions of viewers. He could get in management's ear and poison them against Sheamus politically. And in wrestling, that kind of social and political power is often more dangerous to your career longevity than a black eye or a bruised ego. Sheamus feared the culture war that Miz represented. He feared being left behind by the changing business model. And he feared the Miz's ability to thrive in that new world while Sheamus desperately clung to the old values. Number 7. CM Punk. Fear of volatility. Sheamus and CM Punk did not get along. This is not a secret or a rumor. This is documented fact. Sheamus has said it himself in multiple interviews. We just did not click. It is actually rare for wrestlers to be that blunt and honest about their interpersonal conflicts. Usually they give carefully crafted corporate answers that protect everyone involved. But Sheamus and Punk were polar opposites in almost every way imaginable. And their friction was palpable even to fans watching from home. Punk was the straight-edge, anti-authority rebel who looked like he had wandered in from a punk rock concert. He questioned every decision management made. He held visible disdain for the corporate structure of WWE. He did not care who he offended with his opinions. He burned bridges intentionally and seemed to enjoy the chaos he created. Sheamus was the ultimate company man. The Celtic Warrior who did his job without complaint, engaged positively in every PR opportunity, and maintained a close personal relationship with management, specifically with Triple H, which would become its own problem. During Punk's historic 434-day reign as WWE Champion from 2011 to 2013, Sheamus was often running parallel as the World Heavyweight Champion or a top contender in that division. They occupied the same main event spaces on pay-per-views. They were positioned as equals in the company hierarchy, but the friction between them was always evident to anyone paying attention. Reports suggest Punk viewed Sheamus as a product of the corporate machine, a Triple H guy who got his spot through backstage politics rather than pure talent, while Sheamus likely viewed Punk as a disruptor who made the entire locker room environment miserable with his constant complaints and attitude. The fear regarding CM Punk was the fear of volatility, the fear of unpredictability. Punk possessed the pipe bomb, not just the famous promo, but the ability and proven willingness to blur the lines between scripted content and reality on live television in front of millions of people. If you feuded with Punk, you risked verbal evisceration that could dismantle your character's credibility permanently. He could expose your weaknesses on the microphone in ways you could never recover from. And because Punk had legitimate, documented heat with upper management, anyone who became associated with him in storylines could get caught in the crossfire of his ongoing wars with Vince McMahon and Triple H. For a consummate professional like Sheamus, who values consistency above almost everything else and prides himself on producing banger after banger without drama, Punk represented absolute chaos. The incident where The Miz accidentally dropped Punk on his head during a house show match illustrates perfectly the high-stakes environment that surrounded Punk at all times. A simple botch, the kind that happens in wrestling every single week, became a major backstage political incident because it involved Punk. With Punk, nothing was simple. Everything became complicated. Everything became political. Sheamus had to walk on eggshells around it. He had to protect his spot carefully. And he had to avoid getting dragged into Punk's constant wars with authority. That is a different kind of fear entirely. Not the fear of getting punched in the face, but the fear of getting burned by association with a man who could self-destruct spectacularly at any moment and take several other careers down with him in the flames. Number 6. Alberto Del Rio, the wild card who might snap. Some rivalries blur the line between scripted wrestling and real violence, the line between a worked match and a legitimate fight. Sheamus versus Alberto Del Rio was absolutely one of those dangerous partnerships. In 2012, they wrestled each other constantly, not just occasionally, constantly. Over the Limit, No Way Out, Money in the Bank, SummerSlam, and countless television episodes on Raw and SmackDown that fans have forgotten. The repetition bred genuine contempt between them. Both men worked an extremely snug style in the ring. Del Rio had a legitimate MMA background and knew how to hurt people. Sheamus had his heavy-handed brawling approach that left real bruises. When you put two men like that in the ring over and over and over again, hitting each other for real night after night, things inevitably get stiff. And stiff can turn into genuine aggression very quickly. Video analysis and dirt sheet reports from the time suggest the stiffness often crossed the line into legitimate aggression that had nothing to do with the script. Del Rio, known throughout the the industry for his terrible temper, reportedly grew increasingly frustrated with Sheamus's heavy-handedness. Conversely, Sheamus had to deal with Del Rio's erratic behavior and unpredictable moods. The sheer number of impacts between them, often resulting in welts and bruises that were clearly visible to the audience watching at home, suggests a rivalry where fear was simply the prudent respect for an opponent who could genuinely hurt you for real if you missed a spot or did something he did not like. The fear was constant. Every match was a potential powder keg, that one of them would snap, that a receipt would turn into a shoot, that the match would stop being a choreographed performance and become a real fight in front of thousands of paying customers. Later in their careers, both men were awkwardly grouped into the League of Nations faction. This grouping was rife with internal dissatisfaction from the start. Nobody was happy with the booking. Reports indicate a physical altercation occurred backstage at WrestleMania 32 involving members of the faction, just minutes before they were supposed to go out to the ring and perform. Del Rio has a documented history of backstage fights throughout his career, and legal issues, assault charges. Wrestling Del Rio meant entering the ring every single night with a man who genuinely might lose his temper at any moment over something small. For Sheamus, who prides himself on working safely despite his stiff style, Del Rio was the ultimate wildcard opponent. The destruction of Del Rio's expensive Ferrari in a memorable storyline segment required a baseline level of trust between them, but that trust was constantly being tested by their increasingly aggressive physical exchanges in every match. The fear of Del Rio is the fear of unpredictability and violence. You can plan a match carefully, you can choreograph every spot, but if your opponent snaps and decides to shoot on you, none of that planning matters. And with Alberto Del Rio, that possibility was always hanging in the air. Number 5. Triple H, the workout buddy stigma. Triple H is a genuinely unique entry on this list. Sheamus did not fear fighting him physically. Triple H was not going to jump him in the locker room or shoot on him in the ring. The fear was something entirely different and arguably more damaging. He feared the perception of their relationship and the immense pressure that came with being publicly labeled as the chosen one. In 2009, Sheamus debuted on the main roster, first on the dying ECW brand, then quickly moving to Raw. By December of that same year, shockingly fast by any measure, he was WWE champion. He defeated John Cena, the biggest star in the company, in a tables match to win the title. For a newcomer with barely any main roster experience, this ascent was absolutely unprecedented, and it immediately sparked rumors throughout the locker room and the internet. Persistent rumors that Sheamus was Triple H's workout buddy, that his meteoric push was the direct result of gym friendship rather than talent or merit or paying his dues. This narrative was incredibly damaging to Sheamus's reputation. It delegitimized every victory he earned. It turned the audience against him in a way that was genuine dislike, not the heel heat that wrestlers want. It made the locker room actively hostile toward him because wrestlers who had been there for years felt he was cutting in line. Sheamus has addressed this extensively in interviews over the years. He insists he only worked out with Gunther a few times while they were on tour together in Australia. But the label stuck to him like tar for years and years. The fear here is the fear of expectations and impossible standards. Triple H evolved over time from a peer competitor to the COO of WWE and the head of creative. Sheamus was publicly labeled a Triple H guy by fans and critics. That label offered some protection from being fired or depushed, but it also put a massive target on his back that never went away. If he failed, he would embarrass his mentor publicly. If he succeeded, critics would immediately say it was handed to him through politics. There was no winning scenario. Sheamus had to navigate this political minefield extremely carefully for his entire career. He had to prove constantly that he belonged at the top. He had to outwork the stigma every single night. Even years later, during his successful resurgence with the Brawling Brutes faction, Sheamus acknowledged Triple H's mentorship in interviews, but very deliberately emphasized his own independent work ethic to create distance from the nepotism claims. But the damage was already done. The perception was set. The fear was the constant anxiety of living up to the impossible standards of the King of Kings, of proving over and over that he was not just a product of backstage friendship, that he was a legitimate worker who deserved his spot. And every single time he faltered even slightly, the critics would be there immediately, saying they were right all along, that he never deserved it. Number 4. Fit Finlay, fear of the master. If the first half of this list is about men, Sheamus had to survive socially and politically in the cutthroat backstage environment. The second half is about men he had to survive physically. Men who could genuinely hurt him in training, teach him through pain, push him to his absolute physical limit and beyond. And at the very top of that brutal list is Fit Finlay. Dave Finlay is arguably the single most important figure in Sheamus's entire professional life. He is the mentor who shaped him, the originator of of the hard-hitting European-style Sheamus built his career on, the man who gave Sheamus his entire identity as the Celtic Warrior. Finlay is widely regarded as one of the legitimately toughest men to ever lace up a pair of wrestling boots. His work in British wrestling on World of Sport and later in WCW established him as an absolute master of inflicting controlled pain. When Sheamus arrived in WWE's developmental system, Finlay immediately took him under his wing. He saw a fellow Irishman with the raw potential to carry the torch of hard-hitting European wrestling into the modern era. The fear Sheamus holds for Finlay is the fear of the master. The fear a student has for a teacher who demands absolute perfection. Finlay taught Sheamus the European style from the ground up, a sophisticated hybrid of stiff strikes, technical submission grappling, and logical match psychology that American fans were not used to seeing. Sheamus has frequently cited Finlay as the mentor who gave him explicit permission to use the Celtic Cross, which is actually Finlay's signature move, the air raid crash. This passing of the torch, this handing down of a signature maneuver, is extremely rare and sacred in professional wrestling culture. But training with Finlay is absolutely not for the faint of heart. Reports from various wrestlers, including Finlay's own son David Finlay, who wrestles in New Japan, describe Finlay's training methods as fighting for your life in a garage. Finlay does not simulate combat in training. He does not pull his strikes. He forces his students to endure real violence and real pain, to learn how to protect themselves properly and project genuine toughness that audiences can sense. Sheamus had to endure significant physical punishment to earn Finlay's respect and approval. And Finlay's approval was the absolute seal of legitimacy Sheamus desperately needed. It allowed him to shed the bodybuilder image that could have trapped him in the mid-card. It made him a legitimate worker in the eyes of the boys in the back. To this day, Sheamus speaks of Finlay with a reverence that borders on fear, the kind of reverence that suggests he would still be extremely hesitant to cross the man from Belfast. Because Finlay possesses the technical knowledge to cripple a man in seconds if he wanted to. The fear is not about losing a fight to Finlay. It is about disappointing the teacher who believed in you, about failing the test he set, about not living up to the legacy Finlay handed down. That kind of fear, that kind of pressure, pushes you to be better every single day, or it breaks you completely. Sheamus chose to be better. Number 3, William Regal. Fear of failing the test? Alongside Fit Finlay stands William Regal, another crucial architect of the hard-hitting style Sheamus adopted and made his own. Regal's influence on Sheamus was both in-ring and deeply psychological. He taught Sheamus the dark arts of the wrestling business that do not get talked about on television. Sheamus credits Regal as a fantastic mentor who helped him navigate the complexities of life on the road from his very first day. While Triple H provided the opportunities and the political protection, Regal provided the actual education in how to be a professional wrestler. And Regal's fearsome reputation as a legitimate tough guy, a genuine shooter from the old carnival days of Blackpool wrestling in England, meant that his advice carried the full weight of hard-earned experience. Regal taught Sheamus the crucial lesson that looking tough and actually being tough are two completely different things. He taught Sheamus how to make strikes look absolutely devastating by actually making contact. The concept of snug working. This is not just throwing punches and kicks that miss by inches. This is controlled violence, making it hurt just enough to be believable and look real without causing actual injury that ends careers. The fear here is the fear of disappointing the teacher who gave you everything. Regal is known throughout the industry for testing young talent physically and mentally. If you could not handle his physicality and training, if you could not absorb his lessons, you simply did not belong in the business. Sheamus passed this brutal test. He absorbed everything Regal taught him. He eventually formed alliances with Regal in various storylines over the years. And Sheamus's later stables, including the League of Nations and his highly successful tag team, The Bar with Cesaro, were built entirely on the foundations of wrestling psychology that Regal laid down. Regal's approval meant Sheamus was not just another WWE creation, not just another bodybuilder who got a push because of his look. He was a legitimate wrestler in the proud lineage of the great European technicians. But that approval came with tremendous pressure. The pressure to uphold the standards Regal set. The pressure to represent the European style with honor and dignity. The pressure to never embarrass the man who vouched for you when others doubted. That is a heavy burden to carry throughout your entire career. And it creates a very specific kind of fear. The fear of letting down someone who believed in you when absolutely nobody else did. Sheamus carries that fear with deep respect because Regal gave him the tools to succeed at the highest level. And failing to use those tools properly, failing to honor the legacy, would be an unforgivable betrayal. Number 2, Drew McIntyre, brotherhood that turns into a car crash. Drew McIntyre is Sheamus's best friend in real life. This is well documented. They traveled together extensively on the UK independent wrestling scene before WWE. They lived together in cheap flats, splitting rent and eating eating terrible food. They dreamed of making it to WWE together, supporting each other through the hard times. They share a bond that goes far deeper than professional wrestling. But inside the ring, Drew McIntyre is arguably Sheamus's single most physically punishing opponent. Their relationship is defined by a mutual agreement that borders on insanity, to hit each other as hard as physically possible without causing permanent injury that would end their careers. This closeness, this deep friendship, paradoxically allows for a level of violence in their matches that would be completely unprofessional with anyone else. They trust each other absolutely. When asked in interviews who hits the hardest, Sheamus consistently names Drew McIntyre without hesitation. McIntyre has reciprocated in his own interviews. He has stated publicly that he has hit Sheamus harder than anyone he has ever fought in real bar fights on the streets of Glasgow. Think carefully about that statement. Harder than legitimate bar fights. Harder than real street brawls with actual criminals. Their matches together are frequently described by fans and analysts as car crashes. In a detailed statistical analysis of their triple threat match involving Gunther, Sheamus, and McIntyre exchanged dozens upon dozens of brutal chest hits. Sheamus delivered over 34 strikes in limited spots alone, the sound echoing through the arena. The rivalry produced several memorable moments, including the infamous burger after burger promo segment. Sheamus has admitted publicly that this was entirely his idea to help Drew get over with the audience. But the real story behind their rivalry is not the promos. It is the devastating physical toll these matches take on both men. The fear in this dynamic is the anticipation of pain, the knowledge of what is coming. Walking into a match with Drew McIntyre means walking directly into a storm of Glasgow kisses, which are legitimate headbutts and claymore kicks that could decapitate you. It is a competitive fear. The anxiety of knowing that to beat Drew, to have a great match with him, Sheamus must endure an absolutely inhuman amount of punishment. And here's the complicated twist. Because they are best friends, they trust each other completely. They know neither will intentionally cross the line into causing real career-ending injury. But that trust paradoxically allows them to get much closer to that dangerous line than anyone else would dare. They can hit harder specifically because they know the other person can take it. They can push the limits further because they know the other will not break. But that does not make it hurt any less. It just makes it survivable. Barely. When your best mate in the entire world hits you the hardest, it reveals a truth about the "I fear no one tough guy" talk. It still ends in pain and damage and bruises that last for weeks. And for Sheamus, that is a truth he lives with every single time he steps through the ropes to face Drew. Number 1, Gunther, the modern boss fight and the fear of being left behind. We opened this entire story in Cardiff, at Clash at the Castle in 2022. So it is absolutely fitting that we end here as well. Coming full circle, Gunther, who was formerly known as Walter before WWE changed his name, represents the ultimate test of Sheamus's career renaissance. He is the one man who has arguably surpassed Sheamus in terms of pure in-ring brutality and physical punishment. The Intercontinental Championship match at Clash at the Castle is widely considered by fans and critics to be one of the greatest matches in modern WWE history. It was a war of attrition, a battle of wills. Sheamus entered that match seeking the one title that had always eluded him throughout his entire decorated career, the Intercontinental Championship. Winning it would complete the ultimate Grand Slam. It would cement his legacy as one of the all-time greats. But he ran directly into the immovable object that is Gunther, the ring general. Gunther's entire offensive strategy is predicated on one devastating move, the chop, a flat-handed strike to the chest that breaks capillaries beneath the skin and turns flesh into raw, bleeding meat. In their brutal encounters, Sheamus's chest is frequently left beet red and visibly bleeding. The damage is not fake. The pain is not selling. Sheamus has praised Gunther extensively in interviews as a physically demanding opponent who forced him to level up his entire game. The fear of Gunther is the fear of obsolescence, the fear of being left behind by time. Gunther represents a younger, bigger, equally stiff version of what Sheamus used to be in his prime. Facing Gunther forced Sheamus to prove definitively that he could still go banger for banger with the new generation of brutal workers. While Sheamus ultimately lost the match and the title stayed with Gunther, the physical toll exacted on both men was extraordinary, and it earned Sheamus something more valuable than championship gold: a standing ovation from over 60,000 fans. It effectively turned him babyface in an organic way that cannot be scripted. The crowd saw a warrior refusing to quit, a veteran putting his battered body on the line for their respect and admiration. Gunther is the monster Sheamus respects most because he sees his own reflection in the Austrian's calculated brutality, and that reflection is genuinely terrifying because it shows Sheamus exactly what he is up against. A new generation that learned everything from watching him, that matches his legendary intensity, that might even surpass it. For all his talk about bangers, Sheamus still ran into a wall. and that wall is Gunther. So what is the real truth behind the fear list? The truth is actually quite simple. Sheamus does not fear 10 men like a coward. He respects the 10 men who forced him to become the Celtic Warrior. His fear list is actually a mirror. It reflects the challenges he overcame to build a Hall of Fame legacy. He got genuinely humbled in real fights by Yoshitatsu and Sin Cara. He learned to navigate those dangerous moments. He survived culture clashes and political danger with The Miz and CM Punk. He survived those backstage wars. He carried the Triple H stigma and the crushing pressure of impossible expectations. He outworked it through sheer determination. He worked repeatedly with volatile and stiff opponents like Alberto Del Rio. He kept himself safe while delivering great matches. He had legendary mentors like Fit Finlay and William Regal who could break him in training. He endured their torture and adopted their lessons completely. His banger identity gets constantly challenged by peers like Drew McIntyre and Gunther, who hit just as hard or harder. He keeps stepping up to the challenge. From the arrogant rookie who lost a fight over dirty dishes, to Yoshitatsu, to the beloved veteran who trades war stories with Gunther, Sheamus's entire career is a testament to survival. He did not run from the legitimate shooters. He learned to navigate them carefully. He did not crumble under the Triple H guy label. He outworked it until nobody could deny his place. He did not break under Finlay's brutal torture. He adopted it and made it his identity. Ultimately, Sheamus's fear list is actually a list of teachers, men who taught him crucial lessons. Some taught him through humiliation that cut deep, some through dangerous political games, some through physical pain that tested his limits. But absolutely all of them made him stronger, made him better, made him the Celtic Warrior. And that is the real story here. Not that Sheamus was scared of 10 men, but that he faced his fears directly. He learned from every single one of them, and he turned those fears into fuel for a career defined by banger after banger after banger. The Celtic Warrior earned his name the hard way, not by being fearless, but by surviving the men who tested him, by learning from those who humbled him, and by coming out the other side tougher, smarter, and still standing after nearly 2 decades. That is the truth behind the fearless. That is the legacy of Sheamus.